On the night of December 24th, there's an old tradition Elle and her friends keep every year. Wherever they are, they return to their small hometown of Wallasey in England to gather at a pub. No matter which corner of the country or the world they're in, they all come back for this Christmas party because they grew up celebrating that night together in Wallasey. In 2022, they did the same. A happy, laughter-filled evening at their usual cozy pub. Around midnight, Elle stepped outside for a cigarette, never knowing a man had been sitting in a car for hours watching the entrance. Elle had never met this man. She'd never seen him or spoken to him, but within seconds, he was about to inflict the worst pain imaginable on Elle's family. Hello, and welcome to True Crime Channel. It was Christmas Eve, December 24, 2022. Elle had been waiting for this day because she could hug her beloved sister again, the sister who now lived in Dubai. Elle Edwards grew up with her sister in a close family in a small town called Wallasey on a peninsula in the northwest of England. Elle trained at a professional hairdressing academy and was working as a stylist in a beauty salon. Unlike her sister, Elle never left her hometown. She loved being close to family. She was especially close to her dad, Tim. Their bond was strong, and he called his daughter his best friend and the center of his world. In interviews, her family says no one was like Elle. Her face, her smile, the energy she brought into any room. Whoever met her was immediately drawn to her. She was extraordinary, with a heart of gold. That night, Elle and her friends headed to a pub called the Lighthouse Pub. All the old friends were there, schoolmates, locals, just like every year. Some still lived in town, others had moved elsewhere in the UK or even abroad. But on December 24th, they all gathered again. CCTV from the pub shows Elle and her friends greeting each other excitedly and having a great time as the night went on. At 11:47 p.m., Elle stepped outside with a few friends to smoke. She sat on the edge of a planter and lit her cigarette. It was freezing. The night was dark. Lights were on, but you couldn't see everything clearly. Elle didn't notice that a man had just gotten out of a car nearby and was walking toward the pub entrance. He appeared suddenly in front of their group and opened fire. That night, police knocked on Tim Edwards' door. Tim, still in the Christmas spirit, opened the door in a good mood, never imagining what was coming. When he saw the police, the smile froze on his face. The news was so shocking it was hard to believe. There had been a shooting outside the Lighthouse Pub. 5 people were wounded. The gunman had fled in a Mercedes, and there was one person they couldn't help, someone who had been shot twice in the head. That person was Elle. Tim's world collapsed. He faced the most painful moment of his life. There was nothing anyone could do. Elle could not survive the 2 bullets to her head. Just hours earlier, Tim had said goodnight to his daughters so they could enjoy their night at the pub. Now only one of his girls was coming home. Tim couldn't understand what had happened. Who would open fire on Christmas Eve outside a pub? And why would anyone target Elle? She had no enemies, was loved by everyone, and there was no one around her Tim thought could be a danger. Police had the same question. Was Elle the intended target, or was this random, and were the bullets actually meant for one of the 4 wounded men? On December 25, 2022, police held a press conference and asked for the public's help. They emphasized there was no time to waste. The gunman was still at large and could kill again. They said they were in the early stages of the investigation and that a shooting just before Christmas at a crowded venue full of young people was shocking. A woman has tragically lost her life, they said, and several men are in hospital. Police asked anyone who had been at the Lighthouse Pub or had video or information to contact them immediately. They said they believed the suspect fled in a dark-colored car, likely a Mercedes, and asked witnesses to report everything they'd seen. On December 26th, police arrested 2 people, a 19-year-old woman and a 30-year-old man, on suspicion of assisting the shooter. They were quickly released. Police, however, reached an early conclusion. Elle had been a completely random victim in the wrong place at the wrong time. The real targets were two men, Jake Duffy and Kieran Sawkeld, both members of a gang who were only slightly injured. The shooting was the result of a serious feud between two rival gangs that erupted on Christmas Eve and cost an innocent woman her life. A few days after the shooting, police found the burnt shell of a Mercedes in a derelict area of Wallasey. They were sure it was the car the suspect used to flee. That clue led, 2 weeks later, to the killer, Connor Chapman. Just days before Christmas, he had stolen that Mercedes. On January 11, 2023, police tracked him down and arrested him on charges of attempted murder of Jake Duffy and Kieran Sawkeld, grievous bodily harm, vehicle theft, possession of a firearm, and ultimately the murder of Elle Edwards. Connor had a dark past. He grew up in Woodchurch, near Wallasey, with his grandparents. He didn't finish school and had no qualifications. At just 14, he was arrested for theft, the start of a criminal path that quickly escalated from petty crime to murder. In 2015, he was convicted of theft, assault, driving without a license, and possession of an offensive weapon. The next year, he was again arrested for possession of cocaine, car theft, and breaching parole. By 2019, Connor was charged with attempted murder. During a feud between criminal groups, armed bikers chased a car, and Connor was one of the motorcyclists who fired at the car. Police intervened and broke it up. Some were prosecuted, but Connor was acquitted. A while later, at 18, he led police on a dangerous pursuit and crashed heavily. He fled on foot, but was found hiding in bushes hours later and arrested, claiming he was waiting for a friend, an excuse that sounded ridiculous. Connor had become notorious, not just to police but among criminals, known as someone who'd spent more time inside than outside. By 2021, at 20, he had 19 convictions for 43 different offenses. He once went 6 months on the run just to avoid a court appearance before finally being caught. Local media called him the most troublesome man in the area. Yet nobody seemed to grasp how truly dangerous Connor Chapman was. In the summer of 2022, 6 months before the pub shooting, Connor was released early from prison, something that, frankly, I personally can't understand. While he'd been inside, his first child was born. Soon after, his girlfriend became pregnant again. Connor claimed he wanted to change his life and be a good father, and used that as a reason to request early release. But it was a lie. Upon release, he was told to avoid any criminal activity. He immediately broke that condition, selling cocaine, stealing, robbing. A wolf doesn't change its nature. By December 23, 2022, a fight between the Beechwood and Woodchurch gangs escalated. Connor belonged to Woodchurch. Members of the Beechwood gang, Jake Duffy and Kieran Sawkeld, beat up one of Connor's friends in public. Connor decided to take revenge. On December 24, he stole a Mercedes-Benz and, armed with a Scorpion submachine gun, drove to the Lighthouse Pub, knowing Jake and Kieran were there. He sat in the car for hours, waiting for them to come outside. Near midnight, when the two stepped out for a smoke, Connor saw there were many innocent people around them, but he didn't hesitate. He opened fire on the crowd. Jake and Kieran were wounded, but 2 bullets hit Elle's head, a young woman who was simply standing near Kieran, not even friends with the 2 men. Before continuing, please support us with a like and subscribe. Thank you. On January 25, 2023, Elle Edwards' funeral was held in her hometown of Wallasey. Hundreds attended. Everyone was devastated because they knew anyone could have been in Elle's place, and this kind of fate could still happen to any of them. The killing showed how easily innocent people become victims of gang feuds. Elle's murder wasn't the only horror in the area. Up to that point, there had been 5 fatal shootings linked to gangs, where innocents were caught in the crossfire. For example, on August 16, 2022, Sam Rimmer, a 22-year-old, was shot dead on a Liverpool street. Police still haven't found the killer, but are sure it was gang-related. Sam, whose partner was expecting a baby, was just a random victim. A few days later, on August 21, 2022, Ashley Dale, 28, an environmental health worker, was shot dead in her home in Liverpool with a scorpion. 4 men were arrested and confessed to planning the attack, but they actually intended to kill her boyfriend, who'd been involved with dangerous people in the drug world. Another horrific incident involved a gang feud that claimed an innocent family. A criminal named Thomas Cashman chased a rival and ran into a family home in Liverpool. He fired indiscriminately, and a bullet struck Olivia Pratt-Corbel, just 9 years old, killing her, an event that shocked the entire UK. These cases, where the innocent die in gang disputes, broke many hearts and made the area feel unsafe. Elle's father, Tim, after his daughter's death, was furious about the insecurity and gang violence and blamed the police most of all. In his view, gangs have easy access to illegal firearms, and police aren't tough enough on them. Since Elle was killed, Tim has vowed to do everything he can to reduce guns in Britain. In an interview, he said, "My goal is that there will be no more Elle Edwards, Ashley Dale, or any other innocent Olivia lost. I want to help make sure these horrific crimes never happen again. We must stand together and keep our community strong. Maybe gangs are intimidating, but if we unite, we can win. We need to prove we're the influential force in society and that we can affect the very existence of these gangs." In June 2023, Connor Chapman's trial began. He wasn't the only one in court. Police also charged Thomas Waring, one of his associates, with helping destroy the getaway Mercedes. Thomas also had an illegal firearm at home. Both pleaded not guilty. Connor claimed he wasn't the shooter and didn't go to Thomas's house to help burn the Mercedes. But after 4 hours of deliberation, the jury found them both guilty. Connor was sentenced to 48 years in prison. His DNA had been found on shell casings. Thomas was sentenced to 9 years, though he could be released earlier. Tim couldn't believe that sentence and said, "In my view, he's as guilty as the man who pulled the trigger. He helped the killer burn the car and hide the gun, a weapon still not found and possibly in the hands of another dangerous person." Jake Duffy and Kieran Salkard, members of the gang who were wounded that night, were later jailed for involvement in fighting and disorder. After release, the court placed restrictions on them. No contact with former gang members, no entering Beechwood or Woodchurch, and no presence in areas where gangs congregate. But it's hard to imagine people like that sticking to such commitments. In 2024, 4 more people were due in court accused of helping Connor Chapman. One was Roxanne Matthews, who allegedly let Connor stay at her home. She told the court she knew nothing and only gave him shelter because he was her best friend's boyfriend, adding that Connor provided her with marijuana and cocaine. Another was David Chambers, Connor's uncle, accused of hiding the clothes Connor wore that night and then passing them to Daniel. Daniel himself claimed he knew nothing, but messages with his mother suggested otherwise. Like Connor and the others, they all said they were innocent, but police had plenty of evidence. It turned out Daniel had taken a screenshot of a news report about Elle Edwards' murder. In messages between Daniel and his mother, Daniel wrote, "I know, I'm looking after his clothes," indicating that he had kept Connor's clothing. Uncle David Chambers admitted he saw Connor on December 25, but said he didn't touch the clothes. He'd merely brought some chairs over for Christmas. A fourth defendant, Paul Owen, was accused of lending his car to Connor on New Year's Eve so he and Thomas Waring could burn the stolen Mercedes seen on CCTV after the shooting. Paul said he did lend the car, but only because Connor asked. He claimed Connor wanted to park the Mercedes somewhere quiet, away from New Year's fireworks. After a few hours of deliberation, the jury acquitted those four. But for Elle's family, none of that mattered anymore. It made no difference how many people were convicted or not. Their worst nightmare had already come true. Their beloved daughter and sister would never return. A hole had opened in the family that could never be filled. Shortly after the murder, Elle's father Tim wrote an emotional statement about his deep grief. He wrote, "No one was like Elle. Her happiness, her laughter, the energy she brought everywhere, unique. Anyone who knew her knows how special she was. Her laugh was contagious. Everyone who spent time with her was left with a wonderful memory. She loved life and had so many plans for the future. Her life was just beginning. Christmas and our family will never be the same again. Elle was the one who kept us together. We will always love her and miss her. Elle is the most beautiful, brightest star in the sky. Our dear girl Elle was the love of our lives. She was my whole world. I will never, ever forget her." It's strange and tragic that in developed countries, the very thing that should bring safety and peace to society has become a source of insecurity and tragedy. If the laws were stricter, if access to guns wasn't so easy, maybe Elle would still be alive, celebrating Christmas with her family. In the United States, for instance, gun ownership is considered a fundamental right. But the reality is that this freedom often takes away safety from innocent people. Even in England, despite strict laws, illegal firearms still end up in gang hands, leading to horrors like this. One of the main reasons is political and economic lobbying, especially in the US, which blocks reform. For many, owning a gun is part of their identity. They feel safer with it, so they react strongly to any talk of changing the law. On the other side, enforcing strict laws is a major challenge. Illegal guns are easily accessible via the dark web and other routes. Many politicians avoid the topic so they don't lose votes, because societies are deeply polarized on this issue. The result is that nothing changes, and innocent people keep dying every day. Yet every human being has the right to live in a safe environment, not to feel constantly threatened, especially by something that could be prevented with proper legislation. What do you think? I'd love to read your thoughts in the comments. Please like and subscribe. It gives us a lot of energy. Thank you so much. See you in the next video.
Okay, let's start this deep dive, not with the violence itself, but with a feeling. A really warm tradition, actually. Think about Wallasey in England. Every Christmas Eve, folks would gather at the Lighthouse Pub. It was, a place to be. And for Elle Edwards and her friends, this was their ritual, a real anchor point in the year.
Absolutely. And Elle, she sounds like she was just magnetic. A hairdresser, known everywhere for this incredible smile, this energy. Mm-hmm. Her dad, Tim, called her his heart of gold. They were incredibly close. He even said she was the one who sort of held the family together.
That warmth, that sense of safety and community, it just makes what happened next so much harder to grasp. So our mission here is to really understand how this night of celebration, the safe tradition, was just shattered, and how it became this awful spotlight on the cost of, random gang violence.
Right. So let's pinpoint the moment. It's December 24th, 2022, almost midnight, 11:47 p.m. Elle just steps outside the pub, maybe for a cigarette break.
Right.
She has absolutely no idea that a man's been waiting nearby for hours, sitting in his sullen, dark Mercedes.
And then just chaos, automatic gunfire. In seconds, Ellie's hit twice in the head. She dies right there. 5 other people are wounded in the spray of bullets, just bystanders. And then you have that truly horrific moment, police knocking on Tim Edwards' door on Christmas Eve. delivering that news.
Yeah, just devastating.
So in the immediate aftermath, the police, they're scrambling.
Yeah.
The big question is, why Elle? Was she the target? But everything about her life suggested no. Absolutely no connection to any of this. They held a press conference, Christmas Day, appealing for info on this dark car, likely a Mercedes.
And it seems they honed in pretty quickly. I mean, they did make a couple of initial arrests, isn't they?
Yeah.
A woman, a man. But they were released fairly fast. It became clear, and the police stated this quite publicly, Elle wasn't the intended target. She was, and this phrase sticks with you, a completely random victim in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Okay, so if Elle was tragic collateral damage, who was the gunman after, and what was the fight even about? Why bring that level of firepower to a crowded pub on Christmas Eve?
Well, the investigation identified the likely targets as two men, Jake Duffy and Kieran Salgal. They were known members of a rival gang. They were actually hit in the shooting, but only slightly injured. And this points to a really serious ongoing feud between two local gangs, the Beechwood crew and the Woodchurch crew. This wasn't just a random fight. It was deeply rooted.
Right, so this feud is the key driver. How did they track down the actual shooter?
The big break wasn't a witness, surprisingly. It was the getaway car. They found the burnt-out shell of that stolen Mercedes ditched in some derelict area in Wallasey, and that wreck somehow eventually led them to the killer. Took about 2 weeks.
And that led them to Connor Chapman, arrested January 11th, 2023. Let's talk about him for a second. His record, it's pretty staggering. Arrested at just 14 for theft. By age 20, he'd racked up, 19 convictions for 43 offenses? Locals apparently knew him as, well, profoundly problematic, the most troublesome man in the area, some called him.
Yeah, his history is alarming. And there's this previous charge, too, attempted murder back in 2019 involving armed bikers. He was acquitted, but it shows a pattern. But here's a really crucial point, a potential system failure, you could say. Chapman was released early from prison in the summer of 2022, just 6 months before he murdered Elle.
And he pulled the classic, I've changed routine to get out, right? Said he wanted to be a good dad, his first kid born while he was inside, another on the way.
Exactly, claimed rehabilitation. But our sources make it pretty clear it was manipulation. The moment he got out, boom, straight back into the life, breaching parole almost immediately, selling cocaine, stealing cars, robbery. It was like flicking a switch. No intention of changing.
So that sets the stage. What specifically triggered the Christmas Eve attack? Was it just blind rage?
It seems there was a specific catalyst just the day before, December 23rd. Members of the rival Beechwood gang, Duffy and Salkeld, the intended targets, they publicly assaulted one of Chapman's friends.
Yeah.
Beat him up. So Chapman was seeking revenge for that humiliation.
Okay, revenge. But a Scorpion submachine gun, that feels disproportionate. Calculated.
Highly calculated. The evidence points away from just spontaneous rage. Think about it. He steals a Mercedes. That takes planning. He gets hold of the Scorpion, not exactly an everyday weapon, and then he waits for hours outside the pub, watching.
That waiting period. It's chilling. He saw the crowd. He knew it was busy. Families, friends celebrating.
Exactly. He saw Elle standing near Kieran Salkeld, one of his targets. He saw all the other innocent people, and he still chose to open fire into that crowd. He had to know, just had to know, that hitting only his targets was impossible. He accepted the collateral damage.
Which brings us to the trial in June 2023. Chapman's facing the obvious charges. Murder, attempted murder, GBH, the car theft. But he wasn't the only one on trial, was he? There was an associate, Thomas Waring.
That's right. Waring was charged alongside him. His role was helping Chapman afterwards, getting rid of the getaway car, mainly, and possessing an illegal firearm himself. The jury didn't take long, about 4 hours, I think. Guilty verdicts for both. Chapman got a sentence of 48 years minimum. His DNA was found on bullet casings at the scene, which is pretty damning. Waring got 9 years for his part in the cover-up.
9 years. I remember reading about Tim Edwards, Ella's father's reaction to that. He was furious. Said Waring was as guilty as the man who pulled the trigger. Felt helping him escape was just as bad. And that feeling must be amplified because the murder weapon, the Scorpion, it's never been found.
Yes, that missing weapon is a huge point of pain and, frankly, fear for Tim Edwards. Where's it now? But the trial also exposed issues around complicity, didn't it? Yeah. 4 other people were charged with assisting Chapman. His uncle, David Chambers. Roxanne Matthews, who apparently gave him somewhere to lie low. Another relative, Daniel, accused of hiding clothes. Paul Owen, who lent a car, used to torch the Mercedes. All 4 of them were acquitted, walked free.
That seems surprising, given some of the evidence reported. Like Daniel messaging about looking after Chapman's clothes. Chambers admitting seeing him right after. Owen lending the car.
It really highlights how tough it is to prove intent in conspiracy or assisting offender cases. The prosecution has to convince a jury beyond a reasonable doubt that these people knew what Chapman had done or intended to help him evade justice for murder specifically. Maybe the jury felt they helped him, yes, but perhaps didn't fully grasp the lethal severity of his crime at that exact moment. Or maybe they believed they were helping him escape something, but not necessarily murder. It's a high bar. Understandable legally, but incredibly frustrating for victims' families.
And zooming out, Elle's murder, as horrific as it was, wasn't an isolated incident in that area around that time, was it? It felt like the terrible peak of something that had been building.
Tragically, yes. The months leading up to Christmas 2022 were marked by other senseless deaths linked to these gang disputes in Merseyside. In August 2022, you had Sam Rimmer, just 22, shot dead, another random victim. Days later, Ashley Dale, 28 years old, an environmental health worker, killed in her own home by a gunman looking for a boyfriend who was linked to gangs.
And of course, the one that really shook the whole country, 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell, shot in her own hallway when a criminal burst in, chasing someone else.
These weren't isolated events. They were part of a pattern of escalating violence where innocent people were increasingly caught in the crossfire. And this context really fuels Tim Edwards' response. His anger isn't just at Chapman. It's directed at the whole system, at the police, at the authorities, at how easily these gangs seem to get their hands on military-grade weapons. He's vowed to campaign on this.
Yeah, he's been very public about it, saying his goal is that there will be no more Elle Edwards, Ashley Dale, or any other innocent Olivia lost. He's really trying to galvanize the community, telling them not to be intimidated, to stand up to these gangs.
And his campaigning really forces us to look at the bigger picture, the systemic issues our sources touch on. It's this terrible irony, isn't it? The UK has some of the strictest gun control laws on paper globally. Yet, those laws were completely ineffective in stopping Connor Chapman from getting a Scorpion submachine gun and using it in public.
So where are these weapons coming from? If legal channels are tightly controlled, how do gangs like Woodchurch and Beechwood get armed like this?
The sources point strongly towards the dark web and international trafficking networks. These aren't legally owned guns being stolen. They're being sourced from outside, often from conflict zones or illicit manufacturers, smuggled in, sometimes in pieces, bypassing all the domestic controls. The laws are designed for, say, preventing a licensed gun owner from misuse, but they struggle against anonymous online dealers and cross-border smuggling.
It creates this huge gap. You compare it to the US, where the debate is often about the right to own guns, sometimes seemingly prioritizing that over safety. Different starting points, but the outcome in terms of legal access can be tragically similar in some ways.
Right. And the politics are incredibly difficult everywhere. In the US, you have powerful lobbying groups blocking reform. But even in the UK, with its strict laws, tackling the illegal international supply chain is complex, expensive, and perhaps politically fraught. The issue becomes so polarized, politicians might avoid tackling the deep roots of illegal trafficking because it's hard and doesn't offer easy wins.
And the result is paralysis. Nothing really changes fundamentally to stop the flow of these weapons.
Often, yes. The status quo persists, the arguments go around in circles, and innocent people like Elle Edwards pay the ultimate price. You have this fundamental conflict. Everyone agrees people have a right to be safe. But actually stopping the violence gets tangled in legislative gaps, enforcement challenges with the black market, and political inertia.
And amidst all that, you just have the raw human cost. Elle's dad, Tim, saying things like, "No one was like Elle. She loved life and had so many plans." And that heartbreaking line, "Elle was the one who kept us together."
Yeah. I think what this deep dive really shows is how one man's calculated act of gang revenge could extinguish a bright, innocent life. But it wasn't just him. It was enabled by that toxic gang rivalry, yes, but also by a system that, despite its intentions, failed to prevent a military-grade weapon falling into his hands. Individual malice met systemic vulnerability.
So we'll leave you with this to think about. Thomas Warren got 9 years for helping Chapman, but the gun itself, that Scorpion, is still out there. Tim Edwards fears it's possibly in the hands of another dangerous person. If the weapon that killed Elle is still missing, what does that tell us about the real limits of our ability to control these illegal arms and truly dismantle these violent criminal networks?